My name is Charlie Ross. I'm a fourth-year chemical engineering student, and I couldn't be more excited to introduce our speaker tonight. Our guest is a Cal grad with a degree from the IEOR department. Yes, clap line. And he later received his MBA from the Wharton School of Business. So, since launching from a Kickstarter in 2014, Allbirds has gone on to design the world's most comfortable shoe, as described by Time magazine. Allbirds have been worn by Larry Page, Barack Obama, Mila Kunis, and myself. Even more impressive than Allbirds' comfort is their footprint. Allbirds has a no-compromise attitude towards using sustainable materials such as wool, eucalyptus, and sugarcane. Allbirds was featured yesterday in the New Yorker Style section, and it was included on LinkedIn's list of top startups of 2018. This past month, Allbirds closed a $50 million Series C investment at a valuation of over $1.4 billion. Allbirds' co-founder and co-CEO, Joey Zwillinger, has appeared on CNBC's Closing Bell and Retail Detail, and we are so lucky to have him as our speaker tonight. Joey Zwillinger.
Thank you. Thank you. Great intro. Okay, that was a wonderful intro. I've never had such a nice intro. Thank you. And I will tell you, I get the good fortune of doing some talks once in a while, and this is the one I'm most nervous for of my entire life, because it's the first one where my mom has been here. You guys are less intimidating. So Charlie mentioned the LinkedIn one. That was one that I was really proud of because it was actually the top places to work in LinkedIn, and we are hiring for a ton of positions. So if any of you are graduating, we also do internships once in a while. That's part of the plug here. That's part of the deal. Okay, so what I thought I would do, and generally I just like to have the opportunity to hear what you guys want to talk about. So I'll give you the opportunity now to prepare yourself that you have to ask questions, otherwise this is going to be a short class. And Vicky has some questions lined up as well in case you guys are quiet for a little bit. But I wanted to talk about generally given where you guys are at in your life, being in school in general, I'm sure you have high anxiety about what you're going to do with your life. And you're probably worried about making money, making an impact, hopefully. So I want to talk about that a little bit and kind of hopefully demystify a little bit about the dots connecting from where you are today to doing something that you're having fun with and successful with, however you define that. Good shoes. And I want to talk about the entrepreneurial journey because I think that's obviously the theme of the course, and also something I absolutely love, and I think it's one of the most fun things to do in life is start a small business or be involved with a small business. So I'll talk about that. Talk about Allbirds and a little bit of history, and then give you just a rapid kind of fire on what we've done since we've launched. I'll keep that short, and then you guys hopefully will ask a bunch of questions to kind of fill in the blanks. But before we do that, I just want a little audience participation. So I'd love to see a show of hands for everyone who's heard of Allbirds before they knew I was coming here. Okay, great. How many, keep your hands up. How many people in that group own a pair? Okay, I assume it's because you guys all have student debt. Okay, so let's do quickly 2 free pairs of shoes, and we'll keep another audience participation. So keep your hands up for this whole time if you have at least 1 foot. At least 1 foot, 1 or 2 feet on your body. You need to have one to enjoy our product. Okay, keep your hand up if you are a men's 9, 10, or 11, or a women's 7, 8, or 9. Okay, now women's 8 and men's 10. Okay, and now if you use Instagram, and if you have over 300 followers, 500, 1,000? Wow, that's pretty good. Okay, I'll give all of you guys free shoes. Come get me after. I just need to sell shoes. That's why. If you guys got to post it though. That's part of the deal. All right. Okay, so let me tell you guys how the long road that I took to get to Allbirds. And so I came to Cal, 18 years old, and I liked physics and math, and so I started taking engineering courses. Just wanted a challenge, and I didn't really know exactly what engineering was, but it felt like a great continuation of the things I loved in high school. So I started in mechanical engineering, and somebody, when I was like a year and a half in, I was like, I don't know if this is actually right for me. They said mechanical engineers go into basements and they design parts and smoke cigarettes, and there's like this huge tray of cigarette butts that they just dab out. And I was like, wow, that sounds horrible. I am not going to be a mechanical engineer. So I left mechanical engineering. And I'm sure that's not true, but that's literally how I could change. I could be that decisive on facts that were probably not very accurate. A professor named Professor Gronsky, who I was hoping to see tonight, was a material science professor and started to tap into my passion for kind of R&D through materials and bringing something out, which is something that's really core to what we do at Allbirds. But I ended up going into industrial engineering, kind of a mix of my mom and dad who are psychologists, and I wanted to blend psychology and business together, and I thought IEOR would be a great place to do that. And so I ended up graduating as an IE major and went and did consulting for a couple of years because I had absolutely no clue what business was. I truly had no idea what business did. I thought that people who ran businesses were in HR, which isn't true in America. But I did an internship to find that out because that's what I thought. Then I decided I needed to be frontline, so I tried this consulting thing, and truly I didn't have any idea. And I'm kind of like emphasizing this to make the point that is still okay for at least the ones that are undergrads. If you're an MBA, you should know what you're doing. I'm joking. But so I did consulting for 2 years, and then what I really caught the bug for was small business. And I moved into, this is about 2007, I moved into a venture capital firm, and we were investing in small enterprises that were typically in the software space. And what I stumbled upon something not too dissimilar from this, but a guy was giving a talk about careers and giving advice. And one of the things he said, which I thought it's always stuck with me, I thought was really profound and smart advice, was that if you're going to find a career, try to put it in a place where you think it's a generational problem or a generational opportunity. If you were in the 70s and 80s and you followed a passion for computing, even if you missed and you made some bad decisions in a couple companies, you were going to come out with such an amazingly transferable and fantastic skill set that you'd land on your feet and you'd do great. Internet, consumer internet, or just the internet generally in the 90s, you would have done fantastic. In 2007, with oil high and my kind of just personal upbringing from Northern California, liking the outdoors, the thing that struck me that was the problem of our generation and that I had some passion for was about global warming and climate change. And so I started really actively looking at and making investments in what at the time was called clean tech companies that were utilizing high technology in either biotech typically or solar photovoltaics and making energy and transportation fuel more sustainable. And that became a big area of interest for me, but I decided that investing wasn't a fantastic place to actually do that. So when I took a break from work life and did a 2-year stint in an MBA program, I spent all my time when I was looking for work focused on joining an operating company that was actually making a big impact, not an investment company, but something that had the opportunity to truly change the world from an environmental perspective. And I came out to the Bay Area during that time and met with like 30 companies over the span of 2 weeks. And I fell in love with this one company and applied for a job. The company was called Solazyme. And we engineered unicellular organisms. They were microalgae. We utilized biotechnology, engineered the DNA, and manipulated the organisms to metabolize sugar and produce high-performance products that could go into fuel. They could go into chemicals, cosmetics, food even. And we had a wild ride. I joined them in 2009, and we ended up going public in 2011. Raised $1.5 billion of capital to invest in manufacturing, research and development, squandered 100% of it, and went bankrupt just about 6 months ago. So learned a ton from that experience. And one of the most important things I learned, I mean, there's a huge number of things I learned, and I could go into it at length, but one of the things that led directly to Allbirds was this experience that I had where I would take these pretty innovative ideas where we could manipulate algae to make virtually anything that you utilized in consumer products or in some industrial products and metalworking fluids and lots of different things. And we'd go to these big companies, and I led the chemical division, which was our biggest group. Companies like Unilever, we sold soap products to. Our algae was part of Lux soap, which is their largest soap product in the world. It's predominantly sold in Europe, which is why you probably haven't heard of it. But so other than Unilever as a really interesting exception, the experience every time was, that sounds amazing, but can you just do what we do now and do it cheaper? And what I realized after just the constant frustration of this repetitive process happening is that largely when people at large companies and brands in general talked about sustainability, it was through corporate social responsibility initiatives. And generally it was greenwashing to the effect of, we're saying what we need to say to pretend like we're sustainable, but there's no authentic tie to what the company actually does. And then I realized that these large brands have been around for so long, they have such an entrenched positioning that when you buy products from these companies, you're getting what they think supports their positioning. So if an athletic brand says, we're gonna make shoes and they're gonna make you run faster or jump higher, everything they do is in pursuit of that, and the sustainability is a total sideshow. And yet I also had great awareness that consumers were ready for something that was a no compromise product that had the benefits that you were looking for in that product category. If it's shoes, it was either comfortable or did the things like athletic companies want you to do, but it was also great for the environment. And so this is happening to me consistently from 2011, 2012, 13, 14. And around this time, my knight in shining armor, who you'll see in the video in a second, he's a gentleman named Tim Brown from New Zealand. He was the vice captain of the New Zealand national soccer team. And he went to the 2010 World Cup and represented them in the highest level of soccer that you can get to. And so after that, he throughout his career, he was a professional soccer player for about 12 years. And on his downtime, instead of doing what you typically think athletes are doing, like playing PlayStation, he was actually making and designing shoes, kind of as a hobby. And he'd been a design background from college, and so that was kind of his hobby. And it took him a lot of iterations, but around 2014, he launched a very early prototype of what was the Wool Runners and what became the Wool Runners, and he launched it on Kickstarter, and he got an overwhelming response. He sold $120,000 worth of the product in 4 days, totally organically, just by sending a couple emails. And there was a few things that resonated with people, but the core fundamental premise, and he wouldn't have articulated it at the time, but around simple design and sustainability, those were two big important reasons why this brand resonated with people at that small scale. So he was about to marry a lady named Lindsay, who happened to be my wife's college roommate when they were freshmen. which was a fantastic coincidence. And when he was struggling to make shoes and actually fulfill them and sell them to people, his wife, girlfriend at the time, told him to call me. And so we started having these conversations about, and this was at the time, I'm having this incredibly frustrating experience selling products into different brands. And I talked to him at length about this idea, and I told him I think it's a fantastic idea, but I think the way you're doing it is not exactly, not all the pieces have come together. So I said, come out to my house. My family was all away for a weekend for some reason. I can't remember why, but the kids and my wife were gone. He came out and I cooked him a lamb stew when he arrived from London. He was living in London at the time, which, since we're making wool shoes, was my attempt at some humor with him. So we had a nice dinner. We spent 2.5 days walking around the hills around my house up in Mill Valley. And we kind of had two things that we wanted to get agreement around on this weekend. One is, well, we also wanted to see if we liked each other well enough to do business together, because it really becomes a marriage. And the two really important things to make this decision was the business idea, was it big enough to be something that was really interesting to sink a huge chunk of our career, our networks, you throw everything into this, your families as well. And secondarily, was it something that we would be proud of 20 years from now? So when we woke up 10, 20 years, still working on the same project, would we be excited to get out of bed and go to work? And would it be something we'd be proud to tell our grandkids or kids about, that this is what we did for a living and this is what we could contribute to society? And the first one, we for a number of reasons, we thought this was a phenomenal business idea. We thought there was a huge hole in the market, and even though, and this market is a big market. If a couple quick numbers to put that in perspective, the average US consumer buys 8 pairs per year. That's women, men, kids. So that's 2.5 billion pairs are bought and sold every year just in the US, and there's 20 billion pairs sold globally. So that's a retail market of close to $400 billion are sold every year. Nike alone, as the biggest shoe company out there, makes 450 million pairs annually. So the numbers are completely staggering. So we knew that if we did something right, even if we were considered like a niche brand, we had a pretty big opportunity. But what we thought we could do, and why we connected the big business opportunity with something we thought we'd be proud of, was that we felt like we could have this no compromise solution where we made the lowest carbon footprint shoes on the planet, eventually trending towards something that was carbon negative, that actually sucked more carbon out of the atmosphere than it took to produce. And we could do that while making amazing products and hence making a great business. So we got conviction around those 2 points literally in a span of 3 days. And then the more complicated question of how we decided what we were gonna do and what we, most importantly, were not gonna do, took us about a month to make all those big decisions. And we batted a business plan of sorts back and forth over the internet or over email. And then we agreed to do it. And so I quit my job in July. We raised about $2 million in August of 2015 now this is. Found out we didn't have a factory about 3 days later, which was a bit of a nightmare. Happy to talk about that. And then we launched the company in March of 2016, and we launched it with this video. So hopefully this will give you a little perspective.
What if you set out on a crazy journey to make a shoe out of wool? And in doing so, found a way to make footwear that was more comfortable than, well, everything. So I know what you're thinking. Why wool? Because it's the world's most miraculous fiber. Inspired by these guys, we found a way to turn one of the world's most amazing renewable resources into a wickable, breathable, comfort experience that's like being upgraded to first class. We dispensed with flashy logos, unnecessary detailing, and a focus on synthetics to create something we think the footwear industry has been crying out for. Something better. The major myth about wool is an easy one, so let's hit it quick. When you think wool, you think hot and scratchy, right? Wrong. This is a completely different ballgame. No offense to the team here, but we're not talking about the jumper your grandma knitted you. Oh no. Our superfine merino fiber is 80% finer than a human hair. So does it matter that most sneakers are made from synthetics and synthetics are made from dirty old oil? We think it matters. That's why we're using something renewable instead. Now, don't just take my mum's word on this comfort thing. Take 30 days, try the shoes, and make up your own mind on what's real and what's, well, not. Now, you're welcome to try and catch a sheep and make your own pair, but probably best to leave that to the experts.
So that's what we launched with in March of 2016, and we had an amazingly great first month. We sold about 10,000 pairs of shoes, and we didn't spend anything on advertising to do that. We had some help from friends like Time Magazine, as you mentioned, Charlie. So that was the start. But what we knew well before we launched this video was that doing one product and doing one material was never going to be something that would be interesting for a company that we had aspirations of building a brand that would stand up to the test of time and through a lot of competition. We didn't realize how much competition we would get so quickly. We probably have, I don't know, close to 20 knockoffs now. Sometimes from big companies, sometimes from no-name companies, and it happened way faster than we expected. And we got really great advice sometime along the way, where we were kind of debating. We had started maybe really early on, and we got this advice kind of as we're trudging through the details of starting a company and all the stress of it. And it was like, should we start research on a next product, and what should that next product look like? We're debating all these things, and all these details are unbelievably important when you have one shoe and you're talking about, 100-fold, 100 times, 100% increase on your product mix. And so we got this great advice that said, if you're not gonna cannibalize your own sales, somebody else is gonna do it for you. So it might as well be you. So just have some courage and get on with it. And we ended up working, and we've always had the belief that we needed to have a pipeline of materials. And these materials needed to do a couple things. We believe in simplified design, so taking logos and stripping those off of products, because we don't generally think people love having giant logos on the side of their bodies or whatever they're wearing. We also think that as you're working more on your mobile phones and days are getting longer and activities are blurring together, your wardrobe needs to keep up with that, so it needs to be comfortable. And we thought that those two things could be really enabled by using sustainable materials that hadn't been used in the footwear industry before. So we thought merino wool, and this particular kind of merino wool, is used typically in $5,000 suit material, roughly, sometimes a little cheaper suits, but it's the finest wool in the world. And we were able to pack that into a $95 shoe. So it's the highest quality stuff that you can possibly get in this kind of material. But we also thought that at certain times it might be a little warm. And while it has amazing properties, it thermoregulates, so it keeps you cold when it's hot and hot when it's cold. In the hottest, dampest summer months in certain areas of the country and in the world, it gets a little muggy in your feet. And so we also like to wear them without socks, so it becomes increasingly important. So we started, before we launched this video, doing research and development on a product that utilized fibers from eucalyptus trees. And I want to share another video with you on what we did when we actually marketed that, when we sold it to people, because I think it connects not just the research and development that we did on the fiber, but it also talks about how we talk about sustainability through marketing, and it's done in a way that's way more playful than what you'd expect a crunchy granola, sometimes kind of preachy type of brand would tell you about sustainability. We try to do this in a much more approachable way, and this is kind of how we tend to do all of our marketing. So this is for trees.
So I was searching the internet and I found that these were supposedly the most comfortable shoes in the world. They're not Adidas Ultra Boost, so I had to check them out for myself.
And then finally, one more quick one. This is probably the one that we're most proud of as a company. This took us 3 years to do, and we work with a Brazilian company that I'd worked with from my previous part of my career, and the largest component by volume that's used in the entire footwear industry is the foam on the bottom unit of shoes, and we, through a long and drawn-out process, convinced these guys to collaborate with us and invest a number of millions of dollars to make it happen. And we basically took petroleum out, which is always how it's made, petroleum or natural gas, and replace it with a very sustainable form of sugarcane that could then use biotech and chemical engineering to get it down and process it into this foam midsole. So it actually became a carbon negative product, and then we open sourced that and allowed the entire industry to use it. And this is a little bit of why we did that.
Ever wonder how shoes are made? At Allbirds, we do. Since the dawn of time, or somewhere thereabouts, they come from this stuff. This stuff makes us feel dirty, mainly because it leads to the footwear industry dumping about 700 million tons of carbon into the atmosphere every year. So we found a better way. It's called sweet foam, and it's made with the world's first carbon-negative green EVA. That's a fancy word for shoe soles. It means a lot less of this stuff and more of this stuff. This stuff is Brazilian sugarcane. It's super self-sufficient, resourceful, and surprise, surprise, makes for one seriously sustainable shoe sole. We're not the only ones who've fallen for this Brazilian beauty. We found a new partner, Braskem, a world leader in green plastics, and they took notice too. They've installed a new system in their factory to help bring sweet foam to life. Soon enough, this green EVA will be there for the taking. Because what good is finding a better way if you're not prepared to share it? Next up is adding sweet foam to all of our shoes. But for now, if you'll excuse us, time to take our feet on a little holiday.
All right, so that's it. And to give you context on, we focused a huge amount on culture at the company. It's a really great place to work. We plan to be over 400 people next year, which will be our fourth year selling products. And we've raised some venture capital. Whatever you guys want to talk about. Open it up for questions.
Do you all want to start, or I can start with some of your questions? It's up to you all. All right.
Hello. What's the main difference in the feel of the wool runners and the tree runners?
So we decided to. We call them, the difference we call them on the website, you'll see, is soft and cozy for wool, light and breezy for tree. And the reason why we did that is we tried to connect, merino wool has some connotations to it. Some are true, but most are not. But essentially what we tried to do is think about who our consumer is and what the problem that we're solving for. And what we found is people were using them, women mostly on weekends, men every day, and we're trying to change that a little bit. But we have more female customers. But what we realized is that typically 50% of people, and we surveyed this, so we learned it. Typically 50% of people who wear our shoes are not wearing socks, and in the summer it gets to 2/3. They don't wear socks because it's so comfortable. So the wool has an unbelievable soft touch to your skin, and it's incredibly comfortable, which is why Time Magazine called it the most comfortable shoe in the world, fortunately, on the first day we launched. But it does get a little hot, and so we made this knit texture with the tree product. And the tree material, the reason why we focused on it was because when you touch it, it's almost cooling to the touch. And so then we knit it into a kind of a mesh pattern with a different kind of a knitting technique. And so it's really open and breezy and lets in all the air. So that's the big difference, and we tried to connect it back to what consumers were looking for.
Okay, so like, are the wool runners and the tree runners marketed to two like different audiences, or like?
Most people buy both.
Yeah.
Like we have most customers, fortunately, buy multiple pairs, and they're kind of both incredibly comfortable, but used for different kind of climates. So we tend to suggest people go for two.
Interesting.
Hi. Well, thanks for the great speech. I just wanted to ask, so why is it called Allbirds?
Yeah, we were asking around a bunch of questions when we were naming the company, just brainstorming, like, what kind of trees are in New Zealand. We're a New Zealand heritage company, as you could tell from my partner's accent, and we use New Zealand sheep for the wool. And it turns out that when man first settled in New Zealand, which is around 1200, it was one of the last places to be populated. The Maori settled there. There was all birds, no mammals. So it's a little kind of nod back to the heritage before people came around and screwed things up and brought sheep and whatnot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking. I really enjoyed your presentation. Personally, I'm really curious to hear about what the process was for taking your the foam soles open source, and if you were met with any internal resistance within the company in terms of maintaining a profit.
Yeah, it's we did it for both altruistic reasons, because if everyone uses it, it's going to be much, much better for the planet, but also pragmatically, if we allowed everyone to use it and people did use it, more of it would be produced and the cost would go down. So we would actually enjoy a much better cost structure. And we were committed to the fact that we were going to use it no matter what. So we wanted to get the best opportunity to do so. And we've had over 30 companies call us, all the biggest companies that you can think of in footwear and apparel, plus some in automotive, which is another use for this material, and some in solar, have called us to use the material. So it's been just an absolute home run success, and that's why we're very proud of the impact and the business results.
Hi, thanks for your speech. So you said that you were like a mechanical engineer at first, and you switched to IE. So I don't know, like normally what a shoe designer's backgrounds are supposed to be, but how do you think your engineering background helped you with your shoe business?
I tend to think, I've never actually been an engineer since I studied engineering, but I tend to think that the mindset of an engineer is one that kind of utilizes an analytical thought process to dissect a problem and come up with a creative solution. And I think that is true for whatever you do. It doesn't really matter, business or else or otherwise. So that certainly has helped. I've never been in charge of the design specifically. Tim handles that kind of part of it. But when you make a shoe, you're actually using molds typically. We have multiple molds that come into play for a single shoe. And you're doing injection molding for the bottom, compression molding for the insole, and then you're matching that with an upper material that's soft. And when you're connecting a soft textile like that with a hard good at the bottom that has a lot of molding components to it and has it expands in the mold, this is a super complex problem. And then you couple that when you're trying to make many thousands or millions of these things. There's probably 35 process steps to make one shoe, and there's a lot of people involved in each of those process steps. And if you mess up by 1 millimeter of tolerance, it'll ripple through the entire process flow, and it'll be a scrap pair of shoes. And you want to keep it below, we target below 0.2% defects in our manufacturing line. And so if you're trying to connect a really well-designed thing that works biomechanically for a person with an industrial scale process like that, with molded pieces and soft pieces, it's an incredibly difficult challenge. So it becomes a like the best companies in the footwear industry are unbelievable at product development, which takes it from paper to manufacturer ready, and then manufacturing expertise. And so we've hired some amazing people that work for the team that help us with that. And that's where I think some of my process engineering and IE discipline has lent itself well.
I'm going to ask a question from here. The question is, from my understanding, manufacturing tangible products requires considerable infrastructure, partners, and research. How do you go from an idea to a purchasable product? And I'm wondering if, when you talk about that, you can talk a little bit about how many shoes you made and different models in year one versus what you're doing now.
Okay.
Also.
Yeah, it is very difficult, and the relationships to develop and to find the relationships in manufacturing are also really difficult. So, as I said, when we raised $2 million, and the reason why we raised $2 million was that we wanted to make $500,000 worth of shoes when we started. So that's a quarter of it out of the gate. And we knew we wanted to spend on people. We wanted to spend a bunch on marketing and brand design and getting the story out there. So that was another probably $500K. So we spent, all told, about $1 million in the 8 months before we launched. And when we raised this money and we found out we didn't have a manufacturing partner, we got pretty frantic. Fortunately, we went through both Tim and my network, and we found 3 manufacturers in 3 different regions in the world, and we basically gave them a shot at our business and a shot at working with us. And we had to sell them on working with us because it's not obvious that 2 guys and a dog were going to make a successful business from a little prototype that we had, which frankly wasn't that good. And so we did have some money backing us, so that helps. We found ended up being through a Cal soccer player, gave us the introduction to a guy in Korea who was liaising between brands and factories in Korea. And he ended up being head and shoulders better than everyone else that we went out and tested with. And he's now our head of manufacturing and sourcing. And we have an office in Korea now. Yeah, first of all, we had to tell them we were going to order at least 15,000 pairs of shoes, which is not nothing. It's not huge for these guys, but we had to sell them on the long-term vision of the company. We had to sell them that we had the team that was going to actually produce good ideas and market it effectively, so that we could actually break into what is an incredibly crowded market. And we had to be good partners. And so I think we went back and forth, and we flew out there quite a lot. And we also gave them a lot of range of uncertainty, and we had no idea how many people were going to buy this shoe. So we gave them a range, so we were honest. And then we whatever we promised, we always exceeded whatever we promised. So as the relationship developed, they now have about 400 people that work exclusively at the factory just for Allbirds. So it's an Allbirds exclusive factory. And we've all along the way over the past 3 years, we've always just had the same philosophy, which is be an amazing partner, under promise and over deliver. And that has really helped us. We tested manufacturing in America when we were doing that as well, and we thought that would be an idea that resonated with people. I actually don't think it does that much, and it turns out that it's very, very difficult to make a shoe in America, not for cost reasons, but for quality reasons. And so I think that was kind of an eye-opening experience for us when we tested in the U.S. I can't remember what else you asked in that question. Yeah, I mean, we needed a huge amount of flexibility and amazing amount of speed. And so what typically takes 18 months, when you draw a shoe on a piece of paper, it typically takes a shoe company at least 18 months to be able to get that on a boat to ship to whatever market they're going to sell it in. And we didn't have a factory at all. We didn't have a relationship at any factory, and we wanted to launch in 7 months. And so they needed to be super fast. They needed to make a quality that could stand up to the challenge of walking around all day, every day for a year, and do that with a material that had never been used in footwear before. So they needed to be dynamic and flexible, they needed to be easy to work with, because it was just Tim and me and a couple other people, and we didn't really know that much about shoes, frankly. So they had to be patient with us and be flexible with how they work with us. And one of the things that we've done, I think, really well has been very crisp in our message to consumers. So we started, you could see from that first video, that we only launched with one shoe, and it was a few different colors, which doesn't increase the complexity too much. And since then, we've only offered about 7 styles in total. And some of those have been limited editions that we've started, like the flip-flop, and then pulled off. And so, we've kept it really simple. And through that period of time, in our first 2 years, we made over 1 million pairs of shoes. And so this is, as we expand this, it gets increasingly complex, but we're going deep with very few styles, and that was something that we offered to the manufacturer early on that allowed them, that's a manufacturer's dream, to be able to go really deep on very few styles. So that was something that was super attractive to them. So that's a few examples. Yeah. Yeah, go for it. Oh, Mike.
Oh, I was gonna.
Oh, you got overruled.
Hi, thank you for coming to speak. How did you calculate your price for the shoes, and why did you decide to do a constant pricing model?
So the price is obviously an incredibly important decision for any business starting that's selling a consumer product to customers. But when you only have one product, it is very, very important. So we went out and we did a test early on, and we basically used SurveyMonkey, and we surveyed about, I can't remember exactly what it was, maybe 1,000 people, and we broke it up into 8 camps in that 1,000 people, and we tested a whole bunch of different price points in the best way we could at the time with limited resources. We didn't have a finished product that we could even show them, so we used a proxy for it, and we asked them, we showed them the whole sequence of things, and we said, would you buy it for $75? Would you buy it for $85, $95, $99, $105, $125? And then we said, what would you pay for it, to one of the other camps? And what we found through that study was that, as you might intuit naturally, and sometimes these things are just validating common sense, that 2 digits is a lot different than 3 digits. And so we found that basically it was consistent. People bought at the same rate, said they would buy the same rate, from 75 up to 99. And then when you flipped over to over 100, it plummeted. And 105, 125 didn't really matter, but it was much lower. And so we decided that we had to stay below 100. And we thought 99 sounded really gimmicky, so we went with 95. And then since we only have one product, once we got it out there, we couldn't use a dynamic pricing model, because then people get pissed. So we've just stuck with it. And then we've offered, and we think that it's a really fair price. We don't make a ton of money. We have, our shoe costs way more than a normal shoe company's shoe costs that's sold at a much higher price. It costs us to make. But we can make a viable business out of it, and we think it's a super fair price performance ratio. You're getting a ton for your dollar when you buy our shoes. So we felt really good about it, and that's why we've kind of kept it there.
Hi, my name is Bavanthan. I'm an engineering student from Denmark. Could you tell us about your digital marketing strategy, how to reach out to the most loyal customers who's coming back for your products?
You said retention marketing specifically, or?
Yeah, digital marketing.
Okay. Digital marketing, you said. Okay, sorry. So for the most loyal customers, we do a few different things. The people who are our brand evangelists are unbelievably important to us. We don't do a referral program, but we tend to have a lot of ambassadors they naturally select themselves and just share it with people. And we tend to think that when we get a new customer that's going to love our product, they're going to tell at least a couple friends, and survey data has kind of shown that that's reasonably true, which creates a huge amount of word of mouth, which is the absolute best kind of marketing you can get. So we do try to do something special for those people, and I'd say we're like okay, not great at this point, just because we're young and we're building certain muscles still. But we give a lot of perks to people who buy a lot of product, or if we identify them, that share it with a lot of friends. Like the people who got free shoes here are going to share it with a lot of friends. But those people, we give things like early access to new products. We give them exclusive products that no one else can get except our most loyal fans. So we do a bunch of techniques like that, and then we do some surprise and delight, we call it, where we just give them little nuggets throughout the year that they don't even expect show up at their door, and it just kind of delights them. And that's a really important way to just keep engagement with our customers. And
what kind of things are surprise? Well,
we write just sometimes it's as simple as a handwritten note from someone on the team, just thanking them for something that they've done recently, and it just goes a long way. But we've given things like we have a cute little animated sheep named Peter, and we give pins of Peter or stickers, or it's things that don't cost a lot, but they just show that we care about the fact that they've been supporting our brand. And I think that's something that frankly not that many brands do. It doesn't sound like it's something a scalable big company could do, because like how could that be important for someone who's making so many millions of pairs of shoes? But I think it really matters, and it's been a really helpful technique for us.
Working?
Oh, don't blow it now that you got the mic.
Yeah. What was the thought process behind your decision to keep your online sales all through your website?
Yeah, it's a really important question. So there's a ton of things that went into that decision. So, and the question, just so everyone hears it, was why did we make all of our sales go through our website versus something like Amazon or some other third-party platforms? So, couple really important things. So we're not a fashion company where we have a seasonal style and then we discount it and go on to the next seasonal style. And when you give it to third parties to sell, if it's Nordstrom.com or wherever, you lose control of your price. They'll discount it when they want to discount it, and then you have a lot of degradation to the brand. And since we're kind of slow fashion, we're not fast fashion, we're pretty slow. And so because of that, we can't lose control of our price. So that's one reason. The second is we want to have all the data for all transactions that happen with us, not out of some like creepy, like privacy breaching thing, but because we think that if we understand why people buy, where they came from, like where they last came from on the web or what they were doing, as just a general aggregated body, we can more efficiently make decisions on inventory, and we can also make more efficient decisions on how we amplify our story and how we advertise. And so when we connect those two things, we can more efficiently get new people to be aware of our brand, and then we can make sure we have the right amount of product to sell. That's a very healthy way to run a business. And when you don't know the data and you have lots of third-party platforms selling your product, you might advertise to them one time, and then they might go buy it somewhere else, and then you don't know what the efficacy of your marketing is, and you frankly don't know how much product to buy other than looking at big aggregated sets of data of like how much you bought last season and how much you expect this season. The analytics get a lot weaker. And so we have a really, because we've chosen that strategy, we've created a really great weapon for us to use for those two things and based on data. And it's very differentiated from what other brands that rely on wholesale. And wholesale is a whole nother separate issue that is one of the most important differentiators for us. As I said, if our product was made by a big brand that typically relied on wholesale, they would probably sell it for $180.
Can you just explain the difference between retail and wholesale?
Yeah, but basically they're the same. So let's say the way I'm using it, I didn't mean to like poo-poo that question, but I have like internal lexicon we use at the company that I should not use here. But we basically, what I'm saying is if you're selling it into, let's say, a department store, the department store takes 53% of the final price. And instead of that 53% going to the department store, we have taken that margin and we invest that in our product. And so we have a much higher cost of goods, or the bill of materials that makes up how much it costs us to manufacture a product is much higher than you would typically see for a $100 shoe. It's probably double. And so what that means is that the customer then gets a lot more value. And so we can afford to give you a much higher quality product at a much lower price. The rub is that stores, when you're in all these retailers all around the country or the world, gets you a huge amount of awareness, so customers can find you wherever they are. And so we have to do a good job of marketing to make sure that people are aware of us, even though we only sell it directly through our own site. So that's the tension that we've had to wrestle with, and we've had a lot of conviction that keeping it through our own site or through our own brick and mortar stores, which we have 3 of now, and we'll have many more next year and beyond that. That's the important piece. That's where we make our investments, not through third-party retail.
Hi. Oh, sorry. In the beginning of the talk, you gave free tools to people that have like more than 1,000 followers on Instagram, and you said you are very proud of the LinkedIn that your company received to be the best to work startup, and all the videos you showed like are on YouTube. And they were made to be shown like on the internet. So what I would like to ask you is to talk a bit how you see social media and the entrepreneur journey together like nowadays.
Yeah, it's a vital link. I mean, some of those videos were used on digital platforms. Some of them are actually used in more traditional. So we've done a little test. I don't know if it's with one of those. It's not with one of those, but we've done some on TV to test it, and we've done some on like when you go to a movie and you're like 10 minutes early. We were one of those videos for like 30 seconds, which is kind of interesting experiment. But social media is unbelievably important. Everyone will tell you that. The reason why it's really important to us is if people are authentically in love with the product and they share it on social media, you all of a sudden have their 500 friends just found out about you, and will have either they will go directly and buy it themselves, and then you have now gotten a new customer for free, which makes your business much more profitable if you can get them that way. Or when you hit them with some kind of other message about your company through another channel of advertising, they're more understanding that your brand exists, they're aware of it, and hence they're much more likely to look at that advertising and then come and buy our product. And so I think social media is inextricably linked to any consumer product company for as long as social media exists, which seems like forever in the year of a startup. So yeah, and that's true everywhere in the world. There's different products. There's Line in Japan, Weibo and WeChat in China, Instagram, and to a lesser degree, Twitter and Facebook here, and yeah, so on. So.
Just to complete, do you guys like actually working on get like organic like feedback on social media, like spend money not on advertising, but to make things that could be like shared?
Oh, no, we don't that much. You know, the social networks don't really let you do that anymore. It used to be that you could make great content and then like millions of people would see it if they like share it around. But that kind of they've basically all of the social media companies around the world have tamped down companies' ability to do that because they want you to pay for it through advertising. And so they basically don't let things from companies go too viral, and hence you have to tend to pay for stuff. So certain things, if you do some crazy shock video that just happens to get like 1 million views and it gets shared around, like that could still happen, but that's not a replicable model for a company like ours, at least.
Last time I checked, Allbirds shipped to just a select few regions like the US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. How did you choose those to be the starting markets? And when do you think you'll be expanding to like some parts of Asia? Because I can identify at least a dozen people I know who would love to have Allbirds.
In which countries?
India.
India?
Yeah.
So because we want to be direct, we actually want to be direct globally. And because this is super important for our strategy to maintain that direct relationship with every customer. And given that that's strategically important to us, it makes it very difficult for us to go internationally because we have to do it all ourselves. And so what we've tried to do is, and when we expand internationally, it pulls on a lot of different capabilities on the headquarter team. And we're still a really small team. And so now we have a team on the ground in the UK, and they're asking for lots of different things from our headquarters team, and it's hard. And so what we tried to do was first expand into smaller countries just to test how it would work, where the risk of, a country like Canada is a great place, but it's 10% of the population of America. So it's not like we're if we do it wrong, we're not missing a gigantic opportunity. So it's a good place to test. And then you take the UK, which is about 60 million, so it's double Canada, maybe two and a half times the population of Canada. And it's also, if you think about like cultural distance or nearness, it's quite near to us. All of the countries that we've expanded to are all culturally near. So there's not a lot of cultural translation that's required of us, particularly because Tim can help in Australia and New Zealand, and our brand kind of naturally has that. And then going to Asia is really difficult. The biggest markets, being Japan and China, are very walled off technologically, and you have to use a lot of different technology, huge language barriers, huge cultural nuances. And so we've tried to take our time and get some battle scars in easier places that are culturally nearer to us before we go to very culturally distant places. But we do think that the opportunity cost of not being in places like India, China, Japan is higher than the cost it will take us to get there. So it's just a matter of when, not if we go there. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you for being here. And there's two questions I would like to ask you. The first one is why you were deciding on working with Tim or not. What were the things that make you go through this decision, and what were like positive things for a co-founder? And the second one is, you mentioned you didn't have like so many different products or colors and stuff. How do you keep being innovative?
Yeah. Okay, so first, I'll do the second one first. Second one, we do a bunch of different things. We have colors that rotate through that can only get you so much. We do a lot of partnerships with different designers or different brands that if we connect with and we take some design inspiration from, they can say something about our brand by telling their story. So we keep it fresh that way. We've introduced styles. We have a new one coming out tomorrow. So we do have a process to bring out new products that are exciting. We did a big thing around kids' shoes at one point last year, which we'll phase out, but for a small period of time, we have a brand called Allbirds, kind of like a sub-brand. It's really adorable. We basically did it for that name. So anyway, there's a bunch of things we do to keep it fresh, and we're still like really actually kind of working through all of that because we're not a fashion company, so it's not a normal muscle for us to develop. Whereas fashion companies, this is what they do. It's a new print, a new pattern, a new collaboration. That's kind of what a fashion company does, and it's not really in our DNA as a company. So we're building that a little bit. On the partner side, there was really two things that we looked for in each other, and one was a low enough ego to tolerate each other for a long time, and then a great level of respect for what each person brought to the table, and an awareness, and I think this is where the ego part comes in, that where you were weak, where I was weak, and where he was weak, and we really have separated the functions in the business around our strengths, and then where we feel uncomfortable, we always ask the other person opinion, and I'll always give my opinion when asked, or periodically at the right times in areas of design where I'm not naturally, that's not where my strengths are. And vice versa for him on tech and supply chain and P&L management and all the rest of the stuff that I do. So that was the most important thing in terms of like partnership behavior. And then I think we just needed to agree that we were doing this for something that was way more important than making a buck. And that became something that it's been more important than I could imagine. And I would suggest that anyone that's considering joining any company, and definitely if you're planning on joining a small company or starting one yourself, that doing something where you really truly believe in what the company is doing and you believe it's something you'd be proud of to do, couldn't be more important. And then making sure that the company backs up that authentic purpose with real actions. And so just some of the things that we did early on, to give you an example, we started our second executive, we called him our VP of Innovation and Sustainability, but he was basically in charge of sustainability initiatives for us. And we track the life cycle analysis of every shoe, which costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. But we did that even though that's not money that you should spend as a startup in the typical startup sense, but we spent it. We chartered our company as a public benefit corporation, which I saw was one of the other questions in the list of questions that people submitted. And then we were certified as a B corporation on top of that. And that means that we believe that not only do we have a responsibility to make money for our shareholders, of which we now have many, but we also have a responsibility to the environment. And we've listed environmental conservation as one of our public benefits, or the public benefit that we have in addition to our fiduciary responsibility. And so we've done that super early on, and we've brought investors along board that are okay with that, and they understand that that's the way that we're doing business. And then we've made a commitment early on that every product, we can't be perfect, and we're never going to be perfect, and that's kind of the whole point of what we're doing, is that we have a mission kind of overarching what we do, which is called making better things in a better way, better products that are just better. But doing it in a better way, meaning lower carbon footprint, is the place we've chosen to fight. And if you try to be perfect right out of the gate, you'll probably fail and you'll probably make a crappy product. So we knew we had to be really, really good, and then just have a consistent effort to get better every single day. And that's what we've done. So every year we track how good we are and how much we're improving in that area. And I think if we didn't connect on that point, and we wouldn't have articulated it as crisply as what I'm doing now when we started the company, but having that belief in that pursuit that you're doing something that's important, and that we both connected on that idea, that meant that we could work together. And that was the powerful link that we had. That keeps us as great partners today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming, first of all. I was wondering if you could expand a bit more on the main roadblocks that prevent you from producing onshore, like perhaps even at your brick and mortar locations, because I feel like that would really tie into your whole sustainability model. Maybe people could come and it could be kind of like a tourist thing where they see how the shoes are made and they have more of an intimate connection of their product.
Yeah. I guess the simple answer to that question is that there's little ecosystems that develop for any industry in different places in the world, and Silicon Valley is obviously a great example. That's a sophisticated one where it's a lot of people with great technology by people at UC Berkeley and Stanford. Then there's the finance community that gives people money who are starting the company. Then the lawyers, all of a sudden they come around with new models where it says, you don't have to pay us until you get around to financing from one of those finance people. So this whole ecosystem develops in Silicon Valley that becomes a very virtuous cycle, and it builds upon itself. In shoes, it's the same thing, just a lot lower tech. And you have these places where, as I said, when you're making a shoe that has a millimeter tolerance for perfection, and it sometimes touches, some shoes, 200 pairs of hands touches a shoe to make it. And so you have that big a risk to screw up production in that. And you're putting a ton of different components. And as simple as these shoes look, there's still a bunch of components in there. There's embroidery, there's some padding on the inside, there's a bunch of things that go into it. And you need all these things to arrive right at the right time at the assembly facility. And exactly cut perfectly or assembled perfectly, however whatever the piece is. And it needs to come together, and that requires people who have decades of experience to do that well and not miss that millimeter tolerance. And the management structure in place for that needs to develop over time. So that thing has gone away from America for 60 years. And it was in Japan, then it went to Taiwan, then it went to Korea, then it went to China. Now it's gone to Vietnam, and it's now moving away to Indonesia and Cambodia. And it just chases low-cost labor, essentially, because of how high a cost this is. Yet it's now gone to the point where even if you didn't care about the labor cost, the expertise is so tight in these areas that you cannot avoid but working in those regions. And until things get totally automated, which some companies are working on, once it gets really automated, then you can bring it back onshore and do things. But one of the hard choices we've had to learn, we've had to make is we don't have the capital to invest in huge manufacturing operations. So we're happy to be fast followers in that. And the place where we've chosen to win is on the idea that 60% of the life cycle analysis, and that's how you measure carbon in and carbon out. 60% of any product, pretty much in consumer products, certainly for shoes, is born in the materials that you select to make the product with. And if we make carbon negative or as close to zero carbon as we possibly can of all of our components, we are going to make the lowest carbon footprint that anyone could dream of. And I know that's kind of a lot of puns all in one sentence, but if we can do that, then we've chosen to win the right battle. And then automation can even help with that further, albeit with some negative consequences for jobs and things like that. So that's something we're mindful of, but that's where we've chosen to win. I think connecting that with the values of our company and making sure that we can say no to things that might be attractive to do things. We could say we want to make it in America, but does that actually tie back to the value system that we as a company to make a dent on global warming? The answer is maybe yes, indirectly, but we have to choose our battles. We're a tiny company. We have 150 people. And if we chose to do everything like that, we would just be chasing our tail. So I think the hardest thing that I've had to wrestle with in being at small companies for a decade now, including Allbirds, is having the patience to know where you want to get to, but that it's going to take a long time to get there, and saying no to things that sound very attractive to go chase, and just having conviction and having a strong set of values that you can tie every big decision back to. And that's I think what we've tried to do.
I do have a last question. You talk so much about the business, and I have a sense that actually you must have a personal mantra or a personal mission or a value statement. And I'm thinking you do, and I'm wondering if you do, if you would mind sharing that with us.
Sure. I don't know if I would say a mantra or a value system that I could articulate very well, but I guess one thing that drives me is this sense of, trying to find the right word. Maybe, I think probably to boil it down to one word would be a sense of agency. And the thing I think that's allowed me to love entrepreneurship and make some of the hard decisions that I've made to start a company or go to a small company in the last one is that not out of arrogance, but if someone else is doing something that looks important, why can't I go do that? And that can be as small as like, there's a piece of trash right there, no one else is gonna pick it up, I'll pick it up. Or as big as, hey, no one's doing this big problem in shoes, why can't I go do that? Having never made a shoe or thought about the industry in my life before. And so I think having some confidence that if you wanna do something important, that you just have to have confidence in your ability, and everyone to have arrived at this seat in Berkeley certainly has that ability. So I think it's then deciding where you wanna put your efforts to.
Thank you for being so inspiring this evening. And I hope you will stay a little bit because I know students will want to talk to you one-on-one.
Thanks for having me, guys. Go Bears.